All right, all right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host, as usual. Thank you all very much for listening. I know there's a lot of MMA content out there, and you choose mine, so much appreciated. And yeah, anything you can do to help the show, as usual, star rating, written review, like, comment, subscribe. All the usual stuff there. Whatever's applicable to your podcast platform of choice is always helpful for the mysterious, unknowable monstrosity that are the various algorithms that will soon be running our lives. Oh, the horror of the nebulous future. All right, on the agenda this evening. Last night, UFC returned to Mexico for the first time in four-ish years. Um, and we'll be reviewing that card. We'll preview the upcoming card, which is one of the worst the UFC has ever put out on paper. I am not given to hyperbole. It is not good. It is not a good card. Your main event is, oh, isn't it Derek Lewis? And no, it's Jairzinho Rozenstruik and Shamil Gaziev. Can we report this to The Hague or something? Like, that's almost a human rights violation, isn't it? So we'll talk about that. I do want to talk a little bit about, we had the first PFL versus Bellator card. That took place also Saturday, and I want to talk a little bit about that. Because, oh boy. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So, we'll hash that out. And, yeah, whatever news there is. Not a lot. Again, it felt like a slow news week. I don't know if it's just the time of year. I don't know. I didn't see a lot of major MMA news, and I don't cover like BS drama. Very rarely. I shouldn't say never. I almost never cover just pointless drama because it's pointless. So yeah, that's kind of where we are on this episode. So yeah, let's jump into it, shall we? So UFC on ESPN plus 95. First up, how did I do on my prediction? Well, your boy went 10 and 2. One fight fizzled. I have added a new column to my spreadsheet. That's only for fights that actually, again, fizzle so that I can keep track of them. It doesn't count one way or the other because usually they get rebooked or whatever. But I just like to make note of it. So, one fight fizzled. Raul Rosas Jr. and Ricky Turcios fell apart. Apparently, some kind of illness related to weight cutting for Rosas. Not a bad illness, I guess, because they're trying to book it for this upcoming card. They're trying to rebook it, which they announced on the broadcast. Actually, on the broadcast. And then Ricky Turcios took to various social media platforms today to say, I haven't signed anything. So, look, the UFC has long had a habit of announcing fights that they want before they're actually signed. We're just doing that again. But hey, whatever his illness was, I have a very low tolerance for the circus. It's not really a circus, but for the discourse and crap around Raul Rosas, which is not really his fault. He's just trying to fight. But he's not. He shouldn't be in the UFC. Let me start there. Not that he can't win in the UFC. He has, but he's only 19. He's got serious skill issues, and learning on the job in the UFC is a recipe for disaster a statistically large portion of the time. So I'm not very optimistic uh, about the long-term future there. And now if he's having, dude, people, as soon as that fight fell out, a bunch of people mentioned, I hadn't seen this stuff, but his weight cut was apparently very, very tough. I'm sure having to cut weight in Mexico City with an altitude of 7,000 some odd feet, like 75, I think, right around there. Huge. Again, the elevation is ridiculous. And trying to deal with that, I don't envy. I don't envy too many people. And cutting weight there must have been terrible, but that is your job. And that weight cut is only going to get worse for him. Your body's not done maturing in some respects physically until you're like halfway through your 20s. You don't keep growing the same way that, you do when you're a teenager, but there's a lot that goes into, again, how your body continues to develop. So trying to cutting weight like that when you're still growing, oh man. Like, I feel for the guy. I really do. That's got to be terrible. But I don't know. Just I mean, I'm gonna sit here and say like nothing of value was lost with that fight falling out. We got a decent overall night of fights. Um, Not exceptional, but pretty good. Pretty good. And again, that one fell out. So again, I went 10-2. The only ones I got wrong were the main and co-main. And I'm not really mad at myself for getting those wrong. Main event wound up being weird in a way I should have mentioned it was possible. Should have mentioned that was possible. Um, Co-main, um, I don't know what to say. I'll talk about that one in particular when I get to it. But yeah, just straight up got that one wrong. Got everything else right. So yeah, 10-2 because with the one fight that fell out, 12 fights. Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that and be happy. And again, I'm not breaking my arm, patting myself on the back here. I'm gonna have bad card. Like there's gonna be some of these times when I don't do well. So I'm enjoying where I am at the moment because year to date that put me at 51 and 21 with two no contests. So I'm good. I'm okay with that. Like I said, my big goal is to be better than a coin flip, and we'll see if I can hold on to that. It's a little bit easier when it comes to how I do it. Like I've seen other things like, make sure you have an underdog pick some props, and that would throw a lot of things out of whack for me. I have no doubt my statistical results would be much, much worse under those circumstances. But I'm doing it the way I'm doing it, so maybe next year. Maybe next year we'll consider that. But for the moment, uh, happy to be doing well. Happy to be doing well in this endeavor. All right. So enough about me. On to the fights. Main event. Flyweights. This was supposed to be Brandon Moreno and Amir Albazi originally. Now, this was not a late notice fill-in for Royval. This has been on the poster. I guess it's been announced for a little bit, but the original, again, the original matchup here was Albazi and Moreno. So, which might have wound up being a bullet dodged by Moreno. I would have picked him to beat Amir Albazi, but man, did he not look good. So, sorry, the actual result, Brandon Royval defeats Brandon Moreno, excuse me. Split decision, 248-47s for Royval and a 49-46 for Moreno. That's a little bit generous, but at the end of the day with this fight, 3-2 either way is fine. It's one of those fights. The first two rounds I thought were very close. And most people I think had it 4-2 going into the fifth. I didn't. I actually had it 3-1 Royval going into the fifth. I gave Moreno the fifth, but again, I still scored it for Royval. I'm not going to go back and rewatch the fight in great detail to dissect my card. but a lot of people were 2-2 going into the fifth. And then Moreno tried to ice the round, but it's not like Royval actually got a whole lot off. So I don't know. My hunch is if you had it 2-2 going into the fifth, you maybe should give that last one to Moreno, but I don't know. Not a hill I'm dying on. I will almost never die on a hill defending my scorecards when I'm doing that live. So, but I should have mentioned that this could have gotten weird because for a couple of reasons. I talked last week in the preview about the wars that Moreno has been in. Dude, that man fought Davison Figueiredo 4 times. And then he had that blood and guts total war with Pantoja and had a couple of other just even before he became champion, like he just had some of these fights, man. Like I apologize if I'm recapping too much from last week, but um yeah, what was one of the ones pre so his first UFC run doesn't go great. Wins 3, loses 2, and gets cut. Then wins a fight outside the UFC, comes back, fights to a draw with Askar Askarov. His Jussier Formiga fighting is not a blood and guts all-time war, but that was a tough fight. Then, again, he gets into that series with Figueiredo, has a fight with Kai Kara-France in the middle of that, which was not easy. Then, friggin' fight of the year last year with Pantoja. That bill comes due, man. I don't think he's washed up. I really don't. So please don't misunderstand me. But that's just a lot. That's just a lot to try and overcome physically. And psychologically too. Like you in some of those wars, man, it messes with how you fight. He was not fighting like he normally does here. He was doing a lot of circling, a lot of non-engaging. And the weird thing about this is, again, I probably should have said, like, this might have been on the table. Because Moreno has had some of these performances that, even that win against Kai Kara-France, he gave up, I think, the first 2 rounds. Or it was 1 apiece going into the third. Like, he's had these weird... Oh, yeah, the time he lost to Davison Figueiredo. So this was their third fight, technically. That was just a weird performance from him. Just very weird. He's been prone to these on occasion. I forget where he fights out of now. Do we have that? He's at Fortis MMA right now, so he's at a good place. But I think there's still a little bit of learning going on between him and that coaching team. Because prior to that, he'd been at Glory MMA and Fitness, which was James Krause's school until Krause got run out of the sport for gambling nonsense. I shouldn't say nonsense, like there's serious legal consequences there, but for gambling-related issues. And Krause had a good read on him, I think. Like they had a good thing going there, trainer and fighter wise, and I don't think he's found that same rhythm yet with his new team. Just an observation. I scored this for Royval. He moved well. He had a lot of volume going. Not a lot of it landed clean, but he just kept busy. And it ultimately kind of just, again, outpointed and undid Moreno. Moreno tried to wrestle him a little bit, but Royval was well prepared to deal with somebody on his back. That's where Pantoja had a good amount of success against him, like getting him down and getting on his back or getting the rear waist lock, right? That gave him fits. He was definitely prepared for that same strategy here. So good win for Royval. Tough loss for Moreno, man. He can still like get things back on track, but this was a tough loss. This was a real tough loss. And this part of the saving grace here is it's against another guy who just fought for the belt, another very, very top-ranked flyweight. Had he performed like this against Amir Albazi, I, again, I'm running this in my head, but I would have liked Albazi's chances there. I would not have liked them, again, like ideal version of Moreno against ideal version of Albazi. I think that's Moreno, but this version of Moreno, I think Albazi would have had a much better chance than a lot of us would have anticipated. Just put it like that. But losing to another top contender like this, it's still salvageable. After the fight, Royval said he wants a rematch with Pantoja. Pantoja was in the crowd. Oh, that crowd did not like him, which is fine. Like, you're not obliged to like anybody as a crowd, but somebody tweeted, I forget who, I put it, it's on my Twitter feed, but they showed Pantoja there. It's like, this dude is 5-0 against the main event. Because he's beaten Moreno 3 times. He beat him on the season of Tough. He beat him in the UFC, and then he beat him for the title. And he's beaten Royval twice, too. Oh, man. Just... And especially to do like in Mexico City, where this is the guy who took away the title from Brandon Moreno is a decently big deal in Mexico. Yeah, he got booed, which is fine. Like he rolled with it. I don't know if we'll get a rematch between those two. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm saying I don't know. Flyweight's kind of weird at the moment. Because again, this was supposed to be Albazi, who was ranked number 2. You've still got Kai Kara France floating out there. You got Matthews Nicolau, Manel Kopp. I think Alex Perez has a fight coming up. There's a fair amount of like hype around Muhammad Makayev, but that guy's got a lot of issues to work out. But depending on how serious the neck injury is to Albazi, they might just go Albazi and Pantoja instead of doing another rematch. I don't know that they will. I'm just saying they could if they don't want another rematch right away. So, worth paying attention to there. Yeah, again, that was it. Good fight. Not great, but pretty good. Co-main event. Brian Ortega defeats Yair Rodriguez with an arm triangle 58 seconds into the 3rd round. What a wild fight this was. This wasn't your fight of the night. It could have been. It wasn't. But I wouldn't have objected to it. So first round, Yair Rodriguez comes out. He's looking pretty good. He's throwing pretty good kicks like he normally does. He hurts Ortega with some punches. Gets on top, tries to pound him out, gets tied up, can't finish it. But is still in control for the majority of that round until like the last little bit of it. They tie up and Ortega gets a takedown. Or he sweeps from bottom. I can't remember which one. Forgive me. But he ends the round in full mount, which turned out to be a sign of things to come. Now, I saw a lot of people go 10-8 for Rodriguez in that first round. You could, and I'm not complaining. I didn't. Now, I didn't because of the way the round ended for Ortega. Full mount is a dominant enough position that if you obtain it and you control it and you do a little bit of something with it, and he did, it was near the end of the round, so it wasn't, utterly game-changing, but it was enough for me to go from a 10-8 to a 10-9. Your mileage will vary on that. Anyone who did go 10-8, I don't disagree. Second round, Ortega, again, he's been battered. His nose is all bloody, and he just guts through it, comes out for the second round, pushes into Yair's face, gets inside kicking range pretty quickly, forces him to box, and Rodriguez he's got decent power in his hands, but his technique in with his hands, and especially in closer like boxing or pocket range, it ain't great. He leans a lot. You can lean at kicking distance. You can't lean in the pocket. Shouldn't say can't. It's really inadvisable for a lot of reasons. There are people who can make it work. To the best of my knowledge, Yair Rodriguez is not one of them. Ortega throws him off his rhythm, gets in his face, pressures him, and Yair seems to struggle with this a little bit historically. Gets a clinch, gets a takedown. Takedowns have not been an Ortega strong suit historically. Seems like he's been working on that. He gets a takedown, spends like 3 minutes, 3.5 minutes, almost 4 in Yair's guard. He passes it on occasion, but most of it is like guard or half guard. He's just stacking him against the fence, smothering him, landing punches, landing elbows, doing enough to keep the ref out of it, and Yair doesn't do a whole lot until the round ends. In fact, one of the judges, the idiot Mike Bell, who gave a 10-8 to Alexa Grasso in the 5th round of the second fight with Shevchenko, stupidly, and just screwed everything up. By which I just mean, like, that's the most indefensible round scorecard I've seen in a long time. He went 10-8 round 1 for Yair and 10-8 round 2 for Ortega. And at least that's consistent. I'll phrase it like that. At least that's consistent. Then 3rd round, more of the same. Ortega comes out, pushes forward, he's jabbing, gets towards the fence, takedown into full mount. Very quick. He set this arm triangle up so beautifully. So he starts going for it, but instead of just like overly relying on sort of the traditional jiu-jitsu way that you do that, which works, I'm not knocking that. I'm saying he started adding some elbows in because he found places where, like, okay, I'm still going for it. I still have the arm isolated. I'm still in good position for this. Let me drop an elbow. Let me hand fight and drop an elbow. And this time when I drop the elbow, I'm going to land my arm in position to finish the choke. So kind of lands an elbow, gets around, gets the arm triangle position. Yair, I've said this before about Brian Ortega. Brian Ortega has a gift for going from the start of a choke to the finish of a choke faster than almost anyone in MMA. Normally, if you're doing the arm triangle, you've got one arm around here, your head's on the mat, you're kind of under my armpit. Okay, I've got to deal with this. Here's a few different ways I can do that. And then while you're trying to scoot your arm a little bit deeper around the back of my head, you're trying to leverage the arm up. I've got stuff I can do. And Brian Ortega just goes from the start to the finish so fast that 90% of your normal defensive sequences don't work. And that is, again, it's a remarkable gift that he has. Because Yair, I'm kind of in trouble. I'm going to roll. I'm going to roll onto my side, and this generally will alleviate the pressure from the arm triangle. It kind of gives up the back, which is why you don't want to do it, but better to have your back taken than to straight up be choked out, right? And I can, the other thing he was doing was you take the arm that's in peril and you reach down and you bring like one leg up and then you grab both your hands together behind the back of your knee, and then what you do is you kind of like press down with your leg. So you're using your leg muscles to help lever down your arm and keep your shoulder away from your neck. It's one of those, like, it's not straight up last ditch attempt to get out of a choke. It's further down the hierarchy. Again, you're like, okay, we'll address the position, we'll try to hand fight. Here's a few gimmicky things with biomechanics that we can do, and then there's actually like another phase below that is just like raw athleticism or cheating, sometimes, to be quite candid. But the other reason you do that when you grab the leg, it's not just to keep your shoulder away from your neck, which, though it helps, you can use the leverage you can generate there to get some momentum going and try to force a scramble. So there's still a few other things going on there. But Ortega didn't try to finish the traditional, because normally when you do an arm triangle, you have a palm-to-palm grip. Usually. This is not guaranteed. There's other ways you can do it, but that's usually what you do. When someone rolls to their hip, again, they're kind of giving up the back, and most of the time they're hoping that's what you take instead. We're starting to see, and you've seen this in no-gi grappling in particular, it started to rise in prominence. A few MMA guys have figured this out too. Instead of just abandoning a near finish to get the back, which you might have to do anyway depending on some other nuances, they'll just keep the arm that's around, they'll keep the catch around the neck and keep the choke, but instead of palm to palm, they'll do a bicep grip, or a figure four, like you do when you finish a rear naked choke. And that lets them get the other hand in play to help kind of lever things down, and then you can just lean, because they're on their hip now, you can lean your whole body weight on top of this. And it's much, much worse. It's harder to finish because you have to do it quickly. The other guy has to not know that you're trying for that. But again, you're starting to see it rise in prominence a little bit. And Ortega just instantly, oh, you're giving me a little bit more space. I'm not giving up on this. It's very close to being done. Switch grip, lean a little bit more, and yeah, your ass to tap. Yeah, heck of a performance from Ortega, man. Coming back after that first round. Of all the flaws in Brian Ortega's game, and there are a few, that man has championship mettle. He went 4 rounds with Max Holloway getting the crap beat out of him, and his corner had to stop it. He went 5 rounds with Volkanovski getting bombed on, and even nearly pulled off a Hail Mary finish in the 4th. Twice. Speaking of, like, if you don't know what I mean by like how quick he goes from the start of a catch, like, oh, I've caught your neck, what am I gonna do? To, oh crap, you're being choked. Look at how fast he grabs that guillotine on Volkanovski when they fight. Look at how he does it against Cub Swanson. He actually adjusted in midair. He adjusts against Cub Swanson, that guillotine. That's a skill. That is absolutely a skill to be able to do that. And not a lot of guys can do it. Most of the time, you have to start your attack and then you sequentially move forward. You move through the positions, it gets worse, it gets more dangerous. If there's a wild skill discrepancy, you can accelerate through those. Like, again, if I'm rolling with a black belt, they don't have to worry about all the hand fighting, right? They don't have to worry about some of the positional stuff. Like, okay, I've got to be careful not to, I'm going to go for this guillotine. Got to make sure my hands are together. Got to make sure I've hand fought. Got to make sure that when I look to sync it up, I don't get my guard pass, like stuff, right? Brian Ortega is so good at catching those chokes that guys who are very, 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 very good grapplers are suddenly at code red trying to get out of them. And if you can bring that to bear consistently, that is a heck of a skill. I mean, there's a couple of things I want to mention here about Ortega. I don't know that he'll get the next title shot off of this. He might. We still got to wait and see what happens with Max and Justin Gaethje. We got to know what Ilia Topuria's return timeline is. I mean, he got out of that fight with Volkanovski relatively unscathed, but there's still some moving pieces. He made a pretty good case for himself in a lot of respects. I'll just say that for Ortega. But on the kind of the downside, his striking offense is mostly punches. Not the end of the world, but he also is a headhunter. He doesn't work the body a whole lot. He doesn't kick a whole lot. He does a lot of, again, boxing, or boxing adjacent punching, and he goes to the head. That is that's a problem. If you're that predictable, it's a problem. The other issue he's dealt with, it looks like he might be trying to address it, but it's still Yair Rodriguez does not have the stoutest takedown defense in the world. Okay, Max Holloway out wrestled him, and I'm not here to knock Max. I love Max. Max is not known for his wrestling acumen. But this has been a problem for him dating back to his first loss in the UFC when Frankie Edgar kind of just... That's one of the last, like, great Frankie Edgar performances. I can't say it's the last, but it's one of them. When you had a young, up-and-coming guy in Yair Rodriguez who's dynamic and powerful, and Frankie just like, okay, I'm going to keep moving. You're going to land some kicks, and then I'm going to time one of your kicks. I'm going to knee tap you. I'm going to get on top. I'm going to stuff your head into the cage so you can't play a high guard like you normally try to do. And I'm just going to punch and elbow you in the face until we're done. And that's exactly what he did. So Rodriguez's takedown defense might still be an issue, but Ortega's offensive takedowns have been almost non-existent. So him getting a few here, they came from the clinch, which is fine. That's a good skill set, but it's also not the same as having to close distance looking for a takedown. So, but if Ortega's working on that, if he can start finding a consistent way to bring his jiu-jitsu threat to bear, he's a scary guy. He's definitely a scary guy. So, good win for him. Really tough loss for Yair. Had Yair won, I think they would have done him and Ilia Topuria. There's some heat between Topuria and Rodriguez. Those two don't like each other, and they're not shy about saying it. So had Rodriguez won here, I think that he would have got a title shot off of it. Ortega muddies the water a little bit. You've got Volkanovski saying he wants an immediate rematch. I don't want that for him. But he's saying he wants it. You've got Max saying he wants a shot. He potentially wants a shot. He's got to deal with... Dude, he and Justin Gaethje are going to they're going to drastically alter each other's quality of life. This is what they're going to do to each other. So we don't know how that's going to go. Max might not be the same guy on the other side of that. I'm not guaranteeing that. I'm saying Justin Gaethje has ruined fighters before. And I don't want him to ruin Max because I love Max. Dude, I talked about this with Pat the other day. It's entirely possible that Justin Gaethje winds up being responsible for ruining both Tony Ferguson and Max Holloway, and he's never booed for it. Which is, it's wild. Like, if you took someone like, no, this guy ended the run of Tony Ferguson and substantively changed him and his ability to fight forever, which he did, you'd think, man, what a jerk. Like, there'd be some enmity there. There isn't for Gaethje because he's Justin Gaethje. He does it to Max too. Like, I mean, he just knocked out Dustin Poirier. Might have substantively altered him. It's not that Poirier hadn't been stopped with strikes for a while before that head kick. He might have done that to Dustin. It's way too early to say one way or the other whether or not he did. We know he did with Tony. He might with Max. And he's still going to be loved and lauded because he's Justin Gaethje. I mean, he's going to be loved because, was it Matt Brown I heard say this? That Justin Gaethje has sacrificed so much of the quality of his life down the line for MMA. You can't boo that man. And I think we all know that. Even if we can't always verbalize it, I think we know it. So, and you've got that out there with Max that's possible. And, who's the other guy? You've got Movsar Evloev, who's still coming up. Arnold Allen's been looking to make some waves still. Evloev's kind of the one who needs another fight. I don't know if that means he's going to fight Yair Rodriguez or if he's got to be in play somewhere in this discussion. But I think for all of the relevant parties, again, we're talking Volkanovski, Holloway, Ortega. Evloev factors into their lives somehow. I don't know if he factors into the title. Again, injury, timing, all these things matter a great deal for how this will shake out. Who knows? But Ortega needed a win here, and he got one. So, again, hats off to him. Real tough loss for Rodriguez. Just, again, I think he would have got a title shot, and that has been derailed entirely. Moving on to your fight of the night, Daniel Zellhuber defeats Francisco Prado via unanimous decision, 29-28 to 30-27. First round was close enough you could give it to Prado, but this was a lot of Prado trying to deal with a guy who's freaking like an octopus. Zellhuber is huge for lightweight. And I don't just mean like height-wise. I mean, that man is all arms and legs. And just, Prado never really consistently dealt with it. So Zellhuber just, after the first round, when it was like, okay, he's not going to slow down, let's stay technical, just kicked him at range, jabbed him, good combinations at the right moments, and just outpointed him, outclassed him in a lot of ways. Good win for Zellhuber. Really good win. Again, this was your fight of the night. I don't hate it. I would have given it to Ortega and Rodriguez, but that's just me. So pretty good win for Zellhuber. Tough loss for Prado. His right eye was busted up. He had one cut like on the eyebrow, one on the eyelid. He got cut under the other eye. It was more by the cheekbone, but I mean, his corner telling him between rounds 2 and 3 when his eyes all messed up, like, okay, you don't need eyes to fight. I mean, you kind of do. I mean, Michael Bisping chimed in on Twitter going, yeah, no, the coach is right. I mean, haha, but you kind of do. um, appreciate the sentiment, but you really should save your fighter. He took 5 minutes of abuse that he didn't need. At strawweight, Yasmin Jauregui defeated Sam Hughes via unanimous decision 30-27 across the boards. Jauregui was trying to bounce back from that really big upset loss to Denise Gomes. She got a favorable matchup in a showcase performance to rebound, and that's what she did. Nothing spectacular. At lightweight, Manuel Torres defeated Chris Duncan via rear naked choke, 146 to the first. These two came out and got after it. Both guys got hurt and rocked a little bit. Torres gets a takedown. Duncan stands. Torres on his back now as they stand. Hits a really nice throw. It wasn't a top wrist lock, but because he had one arm kind of around the neck, which is what kind of led into the choke being happening so suddenly after the takedown. And he had the arm kind of wrapped up as well because he was hand fighting with, like, Duncan's right arm was hand fighting with Torres' right hand. So and that got brought up. The left arm of Torres is around the neck, basically. And he takes him down again. Reminded me of a catch wrestling top wrist lock. It wasn't exactly a bit too much head in play, but reminded me of that. And then gets that immediately onto the back, has the arm already around the neck, and chokes him out. Solid. On the prelims, Hani Barcelos defeated Christian Quinones via rear naked choke, 204 the third. I think he had this one apiece going into the third. Barcelos injured his shoulder, I want to say first round. Nearly got a guillotine choke in the third. Used that, get a snap down. Got the back, got the choke. 36 years old, Hani Barcelos getting it done at bantamweight. That man has an uphill climb, but I'm happy for him. At flyweight, Jesus Aguilar defeated Mateus Mendonça via split decision. 29-28. Again, 1 for Aguilar, 2 for Mendonça. Could have scored this either way. Not mad that Aguilar won it. I think I scored it for him, but you could have, again, 29-28 either way is perfectly fine. at a catchweight fight because these two guys just sucked at weight cutting. So if you'll recall, Daniel Lacerda and Edgar Chairez had a no contest a little bit ago that resulted from a premature stoppage. Chairez had kind of a standing seated arm triangle. Was working that, and Lacerda looked like he went limp. He did not. He was not unconscious. But one of his arms, and when you could see it from the referee's vantage point, and we had some like camera angles that did eventually, because initially everyone was pissed. Then we got some of these other camera angles where Lacerda had one hand, I think it was his right hand, his left hand was trapped. He had it kind of up and like on the hip of Chairez, kind of showing like, hey, kind of showing to the ref, one, hey, I'm still here. Two, like, okay, push your hips away, try not to let that get too close. And it dropped like it was limp. Now, given what happened immediately afterwards, we know Lacerda was just, all right, fine, I'm going to relax for a second or two here. But it was an understandable call by the ref. So, no contest. They rebooked the fight, and then Lacerda has trouble making weight. So that got postponed. They rebooked it here, and suddenly neither guy makes weight. Lacerda weighed 127. So at least an attempt was made. Chairez weighed 131. Like, you're basically you're darn near a bantamweight, at the bantamweight limit at that point. Like, did you even try, my man? Chairez wins via triangle choke, 217 of the first. Lacerda's like 0-5 with a no contest in the UFC. I don't know why he's here. Lightweight, Fares Ziam defeated Claudio Puelles via split decision. A 30-27 for Ziam, and then 29-28 either way. I appreciate what Puelles is trying to do with his game, but you can't be like a leg lock one-trick pony anymore. I mean, even guys who are exceptional at it, like Ryan Hall, have realized, like, I can't only have this. Not a great fight, but I agree that Ziam won, so. Flyweight, Ronaldo Rodriguez defeated Dennis Bondar via rear naked choke, 4:59 of the second. Bondar had a pretty good, 3 minutes. He landed a couple of solid right hands to double legs. Just seemed to fade a little bit the longer the fight went, and then eventually Rodriguez landed a few punches, got him down, got the choke. Shame that Bondar's UFC run has gone the way it has. He's a pretty talented fighter, but he has not been able to put it together in the UFC. Also flyweight, Felipe Dos Santos defeated Victor Altamirano via split decision. There was a 30-27 for Altamirano and then two 29-28 for Dos Santos. I scored this for Altamirano, just to be straight up. I think I gave him all 3 rounds, but I acknowledge that 2 of them were close. A lot of takedowns and some pretty decent control from Altamirano. Here's my thing about this. You do need... I don't think Dos Santos had at any point consistently done enough to negate all of the work that Altamirano put in. There were a few points when he landed some pretty good punches, but it's not like he wasn't getting hit out there also. I'm not bent out of shape about 29-28 either way. This is one of those where my prediction was right, but I don't feel great about it because I thought Altamirano won, but I'm kicking everything off. Mohamed Naimov defeated Eric Silva at 44 seconds of the first round via leg injury. So Naimov comes out, throws a wheel kick. Silva blocks it. But in the process of blocking, because he didn't absorb too much of it, but he was moving a little bit, and his left leg, he stepped back kind of into the gap between the octagon floor and the fence. There was a little bit of a gap there. His heel went in that, and something in his knee popped. He immediately kind of sat down. His leg was straight. He fought up and tried to keep going, but he gets inside tripped very quickly out of a clinch by Naimov. And the ref, he must have said something to the ref, because immediately, after the takedown, the ref is in there going, okay, no, we're done. There wasn't even a lot of ground and pound from Naimov. Apparently they were talking about a potentially torn MCL, which sucks. Kind of a non-fight in that respect, but I I picked Naimov, and he was one of the heavier favorites on the whole card. So hopefully Silva can recover. And a guy in Naimov who is, dude, he beat Nathaniel Wood his last time out, and you got him curtain jerking a fight night. Like let's get that guy a bigger name, and let's get him on a main card at least, please. That doesn't seem unreasonable to me. So that was it. That was your card. Your bonuses, I mentioned already, fight of the night went to Zellhuber versus Prado. Fair enough. Performances went to Brian Ortega and Manuel Torres. No issues there. The only other one in contention for me would have been Barcelos. Much as I liked what Rodriguez did, not quite the same level, and Chairez and Lacerda both being fat means no bonuses for you. But I can totally see going Torres instead of Barcelos there. Last thing I want to note on this one, good crowd, generally, but there was a fight, like a full-on brawl in the crowd after the Torres fight. He tried to calm people down, but there's video out there of this. Like, just several guys fighting, and no security to be seen. Like, whoever was in charge of that just decided to let the fight play out, which is terrible. I mean, Dana White, even after the fact, was asked about it and was like, yeah, security didn't do anything. I've never seen anything like that in my life. Dude, I'll give Dana, I'm happy to tell Dana, to agree with Dana when he's right. He's right here. Like, that was ridiculous. You have security for a reason. It's if something starts, they break it up and don't let it escalate into a brawl. But, I don't know. They didn't that time. Full report, as always, in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com, so give that a read if you're at all inclined. I appreciate it. Alrighty, let's get set up here, shall we? Because next up, we have a card so bad. So very, very, very bad. We have UFC on ESPN Plus 90. 50. UFC on ESPN Plus 96. I'm going to act as though I'll make a pick for the Tercios and what's his face fight, Rosas. I'll make a pick for it, but I don't know where it's falling on the card. I'm going to assume co-main. I'm just going to assume co-main. So that's where we'll put it. If the fight doesn't actually take place, whatever. I'm not going to hold that one way or another against my overall record. All right, so main event. Go. At heavyweight, we're back in the Apex because warehouse fights. Jeez. I appreciate the utility the Apex serves. I really do. And I actually have come to appreciate quiet fights. But the Apex is kind of the worst of all worlds. It is not enough of a crowd to generate an atmosphere, but there's too much of a crowd to generate the atmosphere of no atmosphere. Like, go back and watch some of those, the first, COVID shows the UFC did. I mean, obviously the first one was, to this day, one of the most profound experiences I've had watching a fight was watching Tony Ferguson and Justin Gaethje, in no small part because there's no crowd. Because everything that happened carried such weight. I'm sure with a live crowd that would have been bonkers, because it was a bonkers fight. But there's something powerful about the quiet in that fight. So I can appreciate that, but you have, 50 drunken hillbillies. I shouldn't say hillbillies. You've got, I forget how many people they can fit in the Apex. They can fit a fair number. They don't always sell all their exclusive tickets. But it's enough to, not... Again, it's too small to be a genuine crowd atmosphere, but it's too big to appreciate the atmosphere of silence and quiet, right? Worst of all possible worlds. Don't like it. Your main event is Jairzinho Rozenstruik and Shamil Gaziev. Oh boy, the prospect of 5 rounds of this is not good. Not good. So Rozenstruik, coming off of a loss to Jailton Almeida, this guy's been so up and down. Like, he's got some pretty good wins. I mean, he was getting tuned up by Alistair Overeem before landing the Hail Mary in the end of the 5th and getting a fair stoppage. Then Francis Ngannou turns his lights out in 20 seconds. He beats Old Man Dos Santos. He does nothing for Cyril Gane. He gets beat up by Curtis Blades. He gets smoked by Alexander Volkov. He beats Chris Daukaus. And then Jailton Almeida kind of runs him over. So I don't know what's up with this guy. Overall, he's 7-5 in the UFC. And then we have Shamil Gaziev, who is the first Bahrainian fighter in the UFC. He is 12-0. He won his UFC debut when he beat Martin Bidet. He looked pretty good in that. The problem that he might run into is his gas tank, because, boy, that guy throws nothing but heat. And if Rozenstruik can get out of the first, 7 minutes, this is his fight to lose. I don't know how much faith I have in Rozenstruik's chin at this point. A bigger cage would have favored Rozenstruik. Being in the smaller one, I think, definitely favors Gaziev. I'm pretty sure it's Gaziev. I think my hunch at the moment is Gaziev, but that's mostly because Rozenstruik is just all over the place. So going with Gaziev, I have no faith in that. Yeah, these guys are mid-ish level heavyweights, so I don't know. I don't know what to do there. Okay, so I'm going to assume co-main goes to Tercios and Rosas, and my pick will stand from last week. I picked Rosas slightly. Hang on, am I going to keep that? Cutting weight back to back like that and having to make it on a short time frame. No, that actually is going to change. Am I really going to pick Ricky Tercios? Guy is so weird. He's so inconsistent. I am. Screw it. I'm going with Ricky Tercios. And I'm going to stand by the thing that, you know what? That back-to-back, that second weight cut in a week is going to be a problem if this fight happens. And Tercios is just weird enough. He might be able to avoid the rush early, and then Rosas has no gas tank, so. The way that shook out, I am going to go with Tercios, but I might feel very, very stupid. Okay, here's my caveat. I'm going to give myself a caveat here. If the fight is at featherweight, I will pick Rosas. So, keep that there's my caveat. If they do it at bantamweight again, Tercios. If Rosas negotiates for if it's not bantamweight, I'm gonna lean towards Rosas. So I hate to do a double pick like that, but because it feels a little bit like I'm hedging, but that's gonna be the only caveat I give myself there. So. All right. Presumably next up, we're back in regular order now. Light heavyweights, God help us. Vitor Petrino and Tyson Pedro. I used to have some high hopes for Tyson Pedro. Then he started losing fights that he shouldn't have lost. Like, he should have beat Ovince St. Preux when they fought in 2018. He really should have. But made a couple of boneheaded decisions. Then he fought Old Man Shogun and had him beat. But third round, kind of got sloppy and silly, and Hua got him out of there. So Pedro, after that, he took like 4 years off, or 3.5. 3 1/3, something like that. Comes back, beats Ike Villanueva, beats Harry Hunsucker, loses to Modestas Bukauskas, then beats Anton Turkalj. If he's able to like find consistent form, Pedro's actually pretty good for a light heavyweight. Petrino, 10-0, had a decent UFC debut. He's 3-0 actually in the UFC. What's he done? Turkalj, Prochnio, and Bukauskas, so the same kind of like bottom tier light heavyweights. It's a pretty decent knockout of Bukauskas. The best version of Tyson Pedro, I think, wins this fight. But picking the best version of Tyson Pedro to show up is... I'm just not comfortable doing that. So I'm not going to say he can't win, but that man has not demonstrated the consistency necessary for me to feel confident picking him here. So going with Petrino. Okay. Next up, flyweight, Alex Perez and Muhammad Mokaev. I've been very, very critical of Mokaev. Question is, can Perez be one of the guys to mess with that? Now, Perez has been out of action since July of 22 when he lost to Pantoja. Before that, he'd lost a title fight to Davison Figueiredo. Perez is a pretty good fighter. The activity has been a serious issue for him. Because, look, for a long time, his only loss in the UFC was to Joseph Benavidez. All right, that's a heck of a thing. He stopped Jussier Formiga with leg kicks. That is not easy to do. He's very good. This is a pretty big step up for Mokaev. Dude, Tim Elliott was giving him problems. I mean, he won fair and square, but I'm not going to pretend that, Elliott wasn't causing problems for him. Dude, he had problems with Malcolm Gordon. He had problems with Jafel Filo. Like, Mokaev's good, but there's a real lack of development in a certain handful of areas that just are limiting him. The layoff is a problem for me for Perez, though. And I think ultimately that's why I'm going to lean towards Mokaev. But I like plus... What are the odds on this specifically? Okay, if you don't mind losing, I don't like giving betting advice, so I'm going to phrase this carefully. First of all, never gamble if you can't afford to lose. Plus 200 and change on Perez. I think the fight is closer than that. If you're looking for value, I think that's where you might find it. I'm going with Mokaev officially, but his limitations are going to rear their head, and Perez is the kind of fighter who absolutely could do that. Middleweights, we've got Eric Anders and Jamie Pickett. Anders, not had a good run. Man, that loss to Lyoto Machida, which he should have, I thought he won. I scored that for him. That upended so many things for him. He rebounded okay beating Tim Williams, but he might have had a big fight if he beaten Machida, and instead he got a rebound and then he had to fight Thiago Santos, and that didn't go well. Then he lost a split decision to Elias Theodorou. Then he couldn't beat Khalil Roundtree. At the moment, that's a few years ago. So at the moment, he's 1-3 in his last 4. Lost to Marc-Andre Barrio. And again, there's Jamie Pickett, who is on a 4-fight losing streak. And in fact, his UFC record is 2-6. Only wins over Laureano Staropoli and Joseph Holmes. One has to imagine the loser here goes away. And does Eric Anders have enough left in the tank for this? You know, man, I can't pick Jamie Pickett. I can't pick someone on a 4-fight losing streak against someone who is capable of winning at the UFC level. I can't do it. Going with Anders, but that's a rough one. Bantamweights. Umar Nurmagomedov will be fighting Bezkat Alamkhan. I'm probably mispronouncing that gentleman's last name. Where is he from? Kazakhstan. Excuse me, Bezkat Almakhan. There we go. Sorry. Smaller font, bigger font, easier to read. I'm not trying to be dismissive here. I try very, very hard not to dismiss people when they can fight in the UFC and win, or any fighter. But I don't know that I'm picking anyone to beat Umar Nurmagomedov, and that includes the current top 3 guys in that weight class. I would pick him. I think I'd pick him to beat Sean O'Malley. I'd probably pick him to beat Merab's tough, but I might pick him to beat Merab too. I think that man's going to be champion. So, and against a debutant, look, Almakhan is 17-1, and I am sure that, put it this way, I am sure that man is going to have some success in the UFC. But when your debut is against a guy who's in the title discussion, not like next title challenger, but he's very close. Again, man, I'm trying not to be insulting. That's just, I don't think there's anybody I picked to beat Umar Nurmagomedov at this point. So, pick an Umar, and best of luck to Almakhan. And kicking off the main card, we have Matt Schnell and Steve Erceg. Schnell lost to Matthews Nicolau last time out, beat Sumudarji before that, then lost to Brandon Royval. Lost a decision to an overweight Rogerio Bontorin, but Bontorin then failed a drug test, and then I think got cut. Erceg, he's that Australian dude, right? Yeah, 11-1, 2-0 in the UFC, wins over David Dvorak and Alessandro Costa. I've been decently impressed with Erceg. Not hugely. I am not out here saying next champion, but I don't think he's a pushover. I like nothing against Schnell, who's a pretty good fighter, and is definitely a live underdog here now that I've seen the odds. Schnell's a live dog, but I'm actually going with Erceg. I think his upside is pretty good, and I think Schnell's probably on the downhill side of his career. That is your main card. On the prelims, we have lightweights, Joel Alvarez and Ludovic Klein. So Joel Alvarez, our other Spaniard in the UFC at the moment. His only losses in the UFC are to Damir Ismagulov and Arman Saryukian. I'm actually pretty high on Alvarez as a general rule. All of his wins are finishes. Wait, all of them in the UFC are. Is he all finishes? My man is okay. He went the distance with this Magulov, but other than that, even his fights end in a finish. Try for win over Mark Chikese. Klein is another guy who's pretty good. He's got a couple of tough losses in the UFC, but they were at featherweight. Since returning to lightweight, he's 3-0, 3-0-1. That draw with Jai Herbert. Herbert should have won that if he could have stopped kicking Klein in the groin. This is an Alvarez pick. Again, I'm pretty high on his upside, and Klein is no one to trifle with, but I'm fine picking Alvarez here to win. I have odds on this one. No, no, there it is. Yeah, the odds are with Alvarez. Okay, close, but they're with Alvarez. Bantamweights, Ayman Zahabi and Javed Basharat. Relatively safe pick for Basharat here. I think both of them are pretty good. I think. Hang on, is Javed is Snow Leopard? Yeah, he had that no contest with Victor Henry after the groin kick. That was unfortunate. I think is it Javed that I think is better? I actually do think Javed's a little bit better than Farid. Um, but they're both very, very good. And I'm not trying to dismiss Ayman Zahabi here. He's on a 3-fight winning streak, 2 of those finishes, but Basharat's a guy who I think is going to be a legitimate player in the division, and Zahabi is just not. Middleweights, Christian Leroy Duncan and Claudio Ribeiro. Quick look at this one. Duncan's had a weird time in the UFC at the moment. He's 9-1, I think 2-1 in the UFC. Yeah. Had that weird fight where Dushko Todorovic blew his knee out. Then he lost to Armin Petrosian. No real shame there. Petrosian's pretty good. Beat Dennis Tallulah and looked okay. Ribeiro 11-4. I think he's 1-2 in the UFC. Losses to Abdulrazak Al Hassan and oh man, Roman Kopylov. I remember that head kick he landed on him, man. Oof. Wait, did we lose Alvarez and Klein? Sorry, Tapology's listing Alvarez and Klein as having fallen off. Okay, they're usually much more up to date, so my pick will stand. If the fight fell off, we'll just remove it. That's not a problem. Let's see here. So as far as this fight goes, I'm okay picking Duncan. Ribeiro has not been terribly impressive. And then we have Abdul Karim Al-Sawadi. Yes, Abdul Karim Al-Sawadi versus Loic Radzhabov. I'm going to have to type out one of those names. That's unfortunate. So Al-Sawadi is 15-3. I believe this is his UFC debut. Yes, it is. He's coming off a Contender Series win. He's on a, 5-fight overall winning streak? Radzhabov is another Tajikistan fighter, 17-5-1. 1-1 in the UFC. Had a pretty decent win in his debut over Esteban Rabovic, and then, unfortunately for him, ran into Mateusz Rembeszki, who is pretty darn good. Missed weight for that fight too. I think I'm still going with Radzhabov here. Am I? Hang on. Al-Sawadi is a Contender Series guy. Might be giving him a winnable fight for his debut, right? They do that. Nah, going with Radzhabov. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Oh no. I forgot to spell this guy's name because I'm not typing out a name with a hyphen in it. Zhabov. Okay. And we apparently have, we were supposed to have Vinicius Oliveira and I think somebody else. Yeah, sorry. He was supposed to fight Giannis Gamorri, and then seems like Gamorri pulled out. So, hmm. If the fight's going through, I think that's an Oliveira pick. I'm getting conflicting notes here. Go to my tiebreaker for whether or not the fight's still on. Um, Still kind of listed as being on. That is so weird. Wait, there's a fight listed here that's not listed over here. Must have come together late, I guess. Dude, this card is so messed up. I mean that, man. This card is just messed up. Um, yeah, the UFC's listing. It's also listing another fight that I think has been canceled between Muhammad Yahya and Brandon Marat. Tell you what, for the sake of argument, I will pick these and we'll just see what happens. I'd rather pick them than not. So Oliveira, asterisk by this one. Um, Slightly over Gamorri. Gamorri had an okay UFC fight because he fought on the French card, but let me check that real fast. He's 12-2. No, he lost his UFC debut to William Gomez. Right. Yeah, that one. And then between Yahya and Marat, Yahya is, I think he's the first UAE fighter. What do they call themselves? Emiratis? Makes his way to the UFC anyway. Lost his UFC debut to Trevor Peek. Marat, 8-2. Lost his UFC debut to Terrence McKinney in very short order. Hard to make a pick there. If there aren't odds on that one, I'm going to assume it's really fallen through. For the sake of picking in case the fight is still happening. No, that one's not happening. The UFC's website's out of date. Okay, sorry. I double checked that. I'll let the Oliveira pick stand, even though I feel like that's fallen out too and just hasn't been updated. So that's it. That's the card as it currently stands. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 fights, and not even sure about Rosas and Tercios actually making it, actually being on the card. So could be in for a short night. For those of you who care, this card does start earlier. I think the start time is the prelim started, I want to say 11:30. Main card starts at 4 Eastern. And yeah, the prelims are 1 Eastern, and that's 11 my time. That'll be fun. And that might even be subject to change given how many fights have fallen out, so who knows. It'll be early. I'll have the whole Saturday evening to do something more interesting or to watch better fights. Either way, I'll be covering it in the MMA Zone of 411mania.com per usual, so stop by, say hello. I always appreciate it. And yeah, that's what we got there. So, not a great card on paper. Can only tell you the truth, right? That's what I do here. Okay, let's talk for a minute about the PFL versus Bellator card, shall we? So this took place Saturday. They were in Riyadh for some reason. And I'm not going to call this a disaster. I think that would be too much of a stretch. Let me start with all the things that went wrong, shall we? Production issues. There were audio issues. Um, the commentary team choice was I just don't like Chael Sonnen's commentary. I'm sorry. Um, so that was kind of a net negative for me. At least Big John McCarthy wasn't on the actual call, who was pretty darn bad at that job. But there were lighting issues. The show didn't look good. It just didn't look good on camera. I'm sure there are people there who tried very, very hard, and no one sets out to make something that looks bad. The lighting was terrible. There were color issues. The cage itself was badly lit. Like it was not a good looking event. Um, the crowd. Oi. That crowd could not have been less interested in what was going on. Just could not care less. Uh, I don't understand. I said this before. Like, the only potential reason after PFL acquired Bellator, the only reason to not merge your rosters would be to try and sell, like, again, TV broadcasting rights and ad space for two different events. If Bellator already had broadcast deals in place that you were absorbing, fine, maybe you had to keep them separate. If that's not the case, no, please don't. This is stupid. I listened to Luke Thomas talk about this a little bit, and he's echoing sentiments I've heard elsewhere, and I'm going to add my own voice to this because I think it's true. PFL and Bellator don't actually have a fan base. There was a period of time when Bellator, I think, did. Not the biggest one in the world, but they did have a fan base. That's been gone for a while. To whatever extent Bellator has people tune in, they tune in when there's not a UFC card. And this is the inevitable downside of dominant monopolistic market forces. This card that the UFC put on, that the UFC is putting on, is worse than this Bellator PFL card. It just is. More people are going to watch this stupid UFC warehouse fights featuring a bunch of people most of you have never heard of or care about, and a bunch of fights that are not going to be very good than they do anything that Bellator did, or anything that the PFL does, even when they put on good fights. They have no market power, they have no fan base, they have no identity, they have nothing. And that is the big hurdle. And look, man, overcoming the UFC's monopolistic position is going to be incredibly difficult, and they make weird decisions like not merging their rosters to create a genuinely decent roster. Or they just make decisions that make it harder. You've already got a borderline impossible task. And now you're making it worse with avoidable mistakes. And I want them to succeed. Be very clear about this. It's better for fighters, it's better for fans if there's a robust marketplace of top-tier promotions. The only group that is hurt by a competitive marketplace is the UFC. The fighters benefit, the fans benefit. Now, the UFC won't tell you that because the UFC doesn't want to give up their monopoly or monopsony or whatever it is, but they don't want to give it up. Because, of course, they don't. They worked hard for that. Whether or not they obtained it illegally, well, there's a lawsuit going on about that right now, so we'll just let the courts decide. By the by, a few people deciding to testify on behalf of the UFC in that lawsuit, like Michael Chandler and Donald Cerrone coming out to Guys, you could have opted out of that lawsuit. You didn't. Man, Donald Cerrone going on publicly saying something everyone and their dog knew. That him fighting Conor McGregor didn't actually get him a bump in pay. If the lawyers for the plaintiffs in that case are any good, they're going to eviscerate Chandler and Cerrone, and I forget the other guy that was going to step up. But these are fighters who are going to go under oath and testify that the UFC is not mistreating them. If you're a good lawyer on cross-examination, you can poke a million holes in that, and if you're lucky, make them feel the cognitive dissonance of what they're doing. So, ugh. But as for the card itself, so as for the fights themselves, a few things worth noting here. So, Renan Ferreira defeating Ryan Bader 21 seconds into the first round. You put Ryan Bader in the cage against someone who is bigger than him, hits really hard. That never works out for him. That has never historically worked out for Ryan Bader, ever. It didn't work out for him here. This was like the only time a PFL guy beat a Bellator guy, by the way. Then we had middleweights, probably the best fight on the card. Johnny Eblen and Impa Kasanganay fought to a split decision. Eblen's wrestling is really good, and that is a man built for 5-round fights. But there's a lack of development of some of his other skills that is becoming a bit worrying. At a catchweight fight, because there was a last-minute kind of replacement here, we got poor Ray Cooper III, man. Jason Jackson just beat the crap out of him before the stoppage in the second round. Jason Jackson's a pretty darn good fighter. Another heavyweight fight, Vadim Nemkov defeated Bruno Capoloza via arm triangle, 2:13 of the second. Vadim Nemkov might be the best light heavyweight in the world. I absolutely mean that. And he's moonlighting at heavyweight a little bit now, and turns out he's pretty good there too. Mostly because heavyweight sucks. Yoel Romero beat Thiago Santos via unanimous decision, which is worth watching just for the weirdness of Yoel Romero and Thiago Santos being across the cage from each other. AJ McKee absolutely ran over Clay Collard, got him with a triangle armbar variation in a minute and 10 seconds into the first round. Collard was just not ready for AJ McKee. Which ought to tell you something. Like, Clay Collard's been very successful in the PFL. And he got bulldozed. On the prelims, Aaron Pico got a decent win. He finally seems like he's kind of figured himself out, so good for him. Clarissa Shields would have missed weight, but negotiated with her opponent to, instead of fighting at 155, fight at 165. Then she almost gets her arm torn off in the first round and ultimately wins out a split decision, and then afterwards says, I want to fight Cyborg. Please stop wasting everyone's time. Cyborg would do bad things to Clarissa Shields in MMA at this point. I think that's the only stuff worth talking about there. Oh, another promotional production fumble, by the way. So you had John Jones he was there in attendance. You had Francis Ngannou in attendance, and there was a brief interaction between them, like not face to face, but John saying he wants to fight Francis, and Francis saying you're effing fat. Okay, some people were amused by that. I wasn't. The big thing there was they announced that apparently they announced winner of Ferreira and Bader will then fight Francis Ngannou at some point. Ferreira wins in 21 seconds. But Francis Ngannou was already out the door. Was not sticking around to do promotional material, wasn't going to let him do a face-off, just noped out of there. That man is never fighting in the PFL. I don't care if Anthony Joshua knocks him cold in 30 seconds. Francis Ngannou is never fighting in the PFL. Okay, maybe if he gets knocked out cold in 30 seconds, and the avenues for boxing are just gone for a little bit. But absent catastrophe against AJ, I don't think we ever see him glove up and fight in the smart cage. So there's that. Yeah, I would like PFL to succeed. They're just making it hard, and the UFC's market stranglehold makes it even harder. So I don't know. All right. I think that's all. Nope. Sorry. That's all the fights. So let's move on very briefly to some news. I don't have a lot here. Let's start with this one because this was so Ilia Topuria, new featherweight champion for the UFC, earlier today, was there for the honorary kickoff role for the Real Madrid game. Guys, if you live in the United States and you don't understand the significance of that, I'm going to try and put it in perspective for you. Let me ask you a question. Do you know what the most popular sporting organization, not sport, sporting organization in the entire world is? And if you picked up on the clues that I may have, like the context clues here, the answer is Real Madrid. That soccer club is the most popular sporting organization in the world. Two of like this is another thing that maybe doesn't track for a lot of people. The most followed on Instagram, the most followed American footballer is I think Odell Beckham Jr. And he's got I don't know like 10, 11 million, something like that. Might be so. The Sergio Ramos, who was expressing support for Topuria before his title win, and I don't know that they're close or anything, but they're aware of each other. That dude has like 60 million Instagram followers. You understand that? The most popular sporting organization in the world just gave a platform to a UFC champion. If the UFC does not, let me be clear about what I'm about to say. The UFC's first event in Spain does not need to feature Topuria's first title defense. If they want to check the infrastructure and whatnot, fine. Do a fight night, have Topuria in the crowd, whatever. But if Ilia Topuria's if his first title defense is not in Spain, you are fumbling big time. That man is a megastar over there. So if you want to if you do a small one first, fine. But Ilia Topuria's first fight with that belt on the line should be there. It absolutely should. That guy is about to blow up for them, and bless him for it. I think that's my only bit of news. Again, it's kind of been slow, so let me check Twitter, see what's up. If there's nothing new, we'll do plugs and get out of here. Nothing new, so plugs. All right, last week, myself and Mark Rylich got together and reviewed Madam Web. It sucked. The review didn't suck. Listen to the review. We have fun. The movie, terrible. Just not even fun terrible. Just bad. This week, myself, Mark Radulich, and Alexis Haina will be getting together. Monday? Tuesday. Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, we will be doing our buffet look at Best Picture contenders. So everything that's nominated. We'll talk a little bit about some of them we've previously reviewed, so some of these discussions will be a little bit faster than others, but there we are. Yeah. That's all I've got. Let's see. I don't think MLW has anything new. They did something last week, so I reviewed that, but I think we're off this week. WWE just had their Elimination Chamber event, so Friday I'll be covering WWE SmackDown, per usual, as they continue heading towards WrestleMania, so fun will be had, allegedly. And the terrible UFC event on Saturday, so that's all fun. Isn't it? Isn't it just fun, everybody? Yay, fun. Ugh, long month. January and February, man. This year they've just taken forever. I don't know. Maybe you feel differently, but personally, just have never. They're just dragged and dragged and dragged and dragged. All right. I think that's it for me. So next week we'll be back here to review UFC on ESPN Plus 96, and let me double check. Yeah, we'll be previewing UFC 299. How does that look? O'Malley and Vera is your main event. That's okay. Dustin Poirier and Benoit Saint-Denis. That'll be violent. The UFC debut of Michael Venom Page. Jack Della Maddalena getting a pretty big step up against Piotr Jan. Not Piotr Jan, excuse me, Gilbert Burns. Jan is next. Piotr Jan desperately trying to right the ship against Song Yadong. That's a decent pay-per-view main card. How about... What else do we got? Don't care about Curtis Blades. Actually, I do kind of care about Curtis Blades and Jailton Almeida. That was supposed to happen earlier, but Blades fell out. I want to see Almeida fight a strong wrestler, so I'm curious about that. Who is this woman they're feeding to Macy Barber? Oh, sorry, that's Caitlin Chukagian. She changed her last name. Well, she got married is what happened, sorry. So now it's Sermonara. How do you... Like, could you have named some of the last name I could easily type out? I don't care about. Mateus Gamot and Rafael dos Anjos. There we go. That's a good one. Pedro Munoz is good for a fight. Not much on the prelims. Do I know who Asu Amabayev is? I feel like I do. I feel like the last name in particular, I feel like I've heard. Scooting ahead to UFC 299. I just gotta check this one guy real fast. So I got Felipe Lins and Iwan Kutelaba. Ooh. No, I don't care. I want to say I've seen Almabayev. He's 18-2. Yeah, he won his UFC debut against Dode Osborne. Okay, I thought his name was familiar. Okay. Anyway, full preview of 299 next week, so come back for that. Thank you all very much. All right, that's it. I'm out of here. You know the drill. Thank you again. I appreciate you. Stay safe out there and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.